the whole time, guarding your language the whole time. I feel that to a certain extent homosexuals can be recognised by what they say, even when they're discussing perfectly ordinary topics. Therefore, I guard what I say, even on perfectly ordinary topics. I guard what I say the entire time.
It is a deadly disease, and there is no known cure.
Beginning to surprise me.
Well, then what are you doing down here, then? What do you got this Joker Bascom standing by for, except to smear me as a homosexual, which I'm not?
I never said you were.
The first time an American film ever used the word homosexual was in the 1964 film The Best Man. The word was used in a way to blackmail someone in a political campaign in a race to become the next president of the United States. 1964. That was 57 years ago. Your mother or grandmother could be this age. Well, unless you are 57 in that case. Hello, take a seat and prepare to have this Gen Z weirdo talk about gay people for a while. 57 years is 1 or 2 degrees of separation between someone like myself growing up in a world where being gay was something that you didn't talk about, something that implied you were tainted by something satanic. I, however, went through my teenage years witnessing the legalization of gay marriage in the UK in 2013, and I remember being in the closet cautiously asking my parents to gauge their opinions regarding the subject, which, luckily, were positive. Now we have films that sincerely treat the queer experience as something morally sound, like Call Me By Your Name, Moonlight, God's Own Country, and Pride. The portrayal is somewhat hopeful, providing a direction towards one day seeing gay people be liberated from heteronormative conventions, burdening the ways in which we can express ourselves and the people we love.
But to find out you had a friend you never knew existed, well, that's the best feeling in the world.
There is something I am beginning to notice within the representation of queer people in the media that is beginning to concern me, however. While the queer stories we are shown today are positive depictions of queer people, mostly, I have noticed that until very recently, the majority of these queer roles are in fact played by straight or cis-het people. I know, oh my god, the 22-year-old white guy with a blue yeti is talking about politics again, sound the alarm. But it's not just me talking about this, there are quite a few news publications and talk shows now having this debate.
If flamboyantly ... wasn't in the description of the character, no one would see me, ever, for anything.
The general consensus appears to be that white people shouldn't play other races, able-bodied people get a lot of grimaces for playing disabled roles, and trans roles have a very mixed reception. But sexuality is, for some reason, the exception here, usually stating something along the lines of,
"They did that ancient old thing called acting. A novel idea, I know."
I'm loving the Margaret Thatcher shrine in the background, by the way. I can snog a consenting woman, despite being a raging gay twink, and it doesn't have to mean anything. Only that's not what we're communicating on the screen or the stage when we do it, right? Is it because sexuality isn't visible, and that's okay? Or is it something different? So since I have a background in theatre, I'm going to use that to explain what acting is beyond what the interviews call it as pretending to be something, and provide maybe a few little insights into representation of queer people in the film and theatre industry to provide an overview of what it might be like for someone in the world of cinema and stage to be queer. Let's get into some of the queries. Let's get into some of the queries that I have with straight people playing gay characters. One of the most common arguments I've seen against having queer people be the representatives of queer characters is the argument,
Given that acting is about playing other roles and other parts and other people.
Acting is acting.
I think that that's just a part of acting.
it's just acting. That's what actors do. Okay, but what is it exactly we do when we're just acting? What is that which you're referring to? Unfortunately, I'm one of those pretentious theatre hags who thinks that acting is more than just pretending to be someone that I'm not. Pretending to me gives this strange implication that my performance is not to be believed, or that it is merely a mockery of the person I am pretending to be, as if I'm trying to deceive you. Pretending has this fraudulent undertone to it, and I don't like that because the aim of the game with good acting, the majority of the time, is having the audience believe your performance. But let's not take it from me, let's look at some other theatre practitioners' versions of what acting is. Sanford Meisner states, "Acting is the ability to live truthfully under imaginary circumstances." Excuse me, there's a discrepancy here, sir. Wasn't I just saying that this was about tricking the audience into believing your performance? Isn't acting just pretending to be someone that you're not? Well, Sharon, the reason that we have the extraordinarily classist drama school system we have in the UK is that there is, I regret to inform you, more to acting than just remembering lines and following stage directions. I don't think people realise how hard it is to get into the right position to have an acting career that puts food on your table in the first place either. And on the idea of pretending. How do you know which actions are correct to assume on stage that successfully communicates this character? How does the actor and director know when their ideal realisation of a character is achieved? How do you know where to start? Please, Sharon, do let me know. I'm a little stumped here on how you would portray a queer person on stage with this in mind. We could look to Stanislavski, who uses the method of given circumstances. Your character doesn't exist in a vacuum in this world, so you need to be asking questions about what's happening in the world. What time is it where your character is? Where are we going for drinks? Ha ha ha, if only. Are we getting drunk off of champagne or Bud Light? And does your character want that to happen? These provide the reasons for you, pretending to be that character, for going about the world around you convincingly. So that's another layer to think about. But even then, it's not always going to be the case, especially in theatre, that you'll be communicating this with words. You have people like Steven Berkoff who work in physical theatre, so there's another world of theatre to come to terms with. You have Bertolt Brecht, who prefers to break the fourth wall, so you have to know how to speak to an audience and then go back to your own world, all while being someone you're not. At some point, the idea of acting as just pretending to be something starts to feel inappropriate. There's a clear sincerity in that performance, which is how the audience is supposedly tricked into believing their performance is real. There's a lot to commit to here, and that's what I think Meisner may have meant by living truthfully. Meisner himself prefers to use a repetition technique, which provides a few interesting results.
Not really.
Not really?
Not really.
Not really?
No, not really.
Oh, no, not really.
Oh, no, not really.
Oh, no, not really.
It's beginning to bug you now.
Beginning to bug me?
Yeah, it's beginning to bug you.
Yeah, it's beginning to bug me.
Yeah, it's beginning to bug
Oh, you love that, don't you?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
The exercise removes the confines of finding the meaning in the script through finding the meaning in your partner's words, and replying truthfully in kind. Even though the words they say are thereabouts the same, you can understand the implicit conversation they are having through gesture, facial expression, and mimesis. It's clear they aren't actually having this conversation, but you can't help but believe that little bit of offense when the woman says,
Enjoyment out of it.
Yes, you are.
Stick your tongue out at me.
What doesn't stick my tongue out at you?
Stuck your tongue out at me.
Don't stick my
You
tongue.
stuck your tongue out at me.
It's clear to see the chemistry between these two actors as well. They bounce off each other's energy rather naturally, and different combinations of people reading the same script provide different dynamics. That playfulness would truthfully be different with two straight men. So to go back to before when I was talking about the implication of acting as pretending, I would like to think of the idea of bad acting as someone who does fraudulent acting, or acting that I, and oftentimes the actor themselves, doesn't believe in.
Now Jerry's thinking. He's thinking. He's thinking harder than he's ever thought in his life before. And you have to think too, Richard. You have to rise up to meet him with your thinking.
It's why so many people struggle to accept YouTuber apologies. The theatricality of willingly showing your audience your pain only masks as someone who is trying to be sad rather than someone who is sad. We had a hard time believing in Tati Westbrook's displays of sadness because of the given circumstances around her that point to something else. She's crying about cancel culture and not spreading hate, yet is living in a well-furnished house with beautiful lighting and makeup after coming off of a video that is talking about cancelling James Charles. You can't help but see it as anything but tone deaf to literally everything else she has done prior to this.
It's been a lot of pain. But I am turning to God to get me through it.
Being an influencer or popular figure online usually requires, to some extent, putting on a persona or playing up your personality more than you would on an average day out. And when this persona performs something that is clearly hypocritical to the very essence of that character, that persona dissolves, leaving this phony, this fraud behind. And all that is left is the husk of someone who was pretending to be someone they're not.
None.
This is a bit of an aside, but I am also aware that there are many interpretations of Shakespeare and reboots of popular films that change the context of the piece to something, for example, a feminist context, or a revised version with an all-female cast. So the whole why does it matter if an actor is X thing comes into play again. Being clear with the lens with which you are revising a text is important for your audience to understand the context of the play with this new viewpoint in mind. Otherwise, you just get pop feminism reboots like Ghostbusters or, I don't know, Batwoman. If it's Romeo and Juliet in modern day, the appropriate changes have to be made. And if it's an all-male cast, conversations about sexuality would need to be had. Else the audience lies in confusion trying to understand the choices being made. Still, if we're having to divert this far from the conversation just so you can get at me about how the lack of gay people playing gay characters doesn't matter, then I would seriously revise why it is you're so adamant that there isn't a representation issue here.
You know, unless the script has the word flamboyant gay in it, they won't even see you for a role,
never.
right? Yet a white cisgendered straight guy can go in and play a trans person, a homosexual, anything they want, and then they get applause for it.
Yeah.
Like with the majority of statements that just cloak bigotry with just stating a fact, the context of which you're stating facts with is important.
Acting is acting.
Nullifies the debate from the opposition, or, as they say, it's not that deep, fam. It trivializes the problem I and others of my viewpoint hold about this issue. You have to think about and research, particularly if you're a straight actor, the world of what it may be like for a queer person to inhabit, especially if this is a period piece. Period. And in the age of today where queer representation can be done with openly queer people rather than having it be a brave and perhaps controversial role for straight actors, you theoretically have a whole host of people to choose from that understand this experience. So why are straight people still being cast? When casting directors look for actors to play their roles, they usually provide a set of attributes about the ideal role for the actors they're looking for. So when you have a series that is about queer lives and queer lifestyles, then it would not be so out of the realm of ideas to find people who live that lifestyle. So after making that set of characteristics in the actors, casting directors have a priority list of actors they would choose from, and if most refuse because it's out of their pay grade or acting gay, yikes, is not something they're comfortable with, then they find the next best thing. And by that, I mean the names that sell the show, rather than the people that fit the experience. Now I know that people will say that acting gay is something in and of itself a performance, and I agree with you there that the expression of sexual identity is performative. But you said, yes, I did. Now pay attention, I know clicking through the video to find the point of this is enticing, but bear with me and I will get to the heart of the issue of performing queerness. In January 2021, Piers Morgan, one of two hosts of a British morning news programme, Good Morning Britain, appears to be the moderator, God help us, in the debate being had between Christopher Biggins, who is gay but thinks anyone can play gay roles, and Benjamin Butterworth, a gay journalist who believes only gay people should play gay roles. Oh my god, these names are so British, I hate it. This debate came about because of writer Russell T Davies, the writer of It's a Sin, a British TV series that came out around the same time, stated his opinion which is in line with what Ben is arguing for. Now, in the UK, Piers Morgan has a bit of a habit of doing that consistently to everyone he interviews, especially those who believe in left-wing politics of gender expression and black or POC rights. Piers immediately asks the question,
first question, what is an actor?
Where he answers,
well, an actor is someone who plays something else. Who portrays a role that's been written fictionally.
This is done for Piers to obviously use against Ben later. But since I already spoke about acting being a bit more than the definition provided in the debate here, we can skip that point. But the next question he blurts out, I guess, because he certainly wasn't asking, is...
should straight roles, heterosexual roles, in movies and television only be played by straight actors?
I would like to go out on a limb to say that Piers is asking these two questions because he wants to frame the debate not to be why are gay actors allowed to play straight, but rather what makes the gay experience so different from a straight experience. And Ben answers rather innocently, bless him.
No, and I don't accept that that's the same as the reverse.
In truth, this is a weak argument against the question Piers faces, but does it answer what he's really trying to debate? Another point Ben makes is...
But now what I'm saying is that gay actors who have this lived experience, who have the authenticity of having been through it, for example, with Russell T Davies' programmes about HIV, some of those actors will have been around to know what that's like, and it brings that added dimension. And I think that's what makes it so much more powerful.
And that, I believe, is the point queer people are trying to get across. But casting directors and
nobody with a brain
don't understand that the experience of being queer is much farther apart from a straight experience than you would think, even today. While the representation of queer people has grown to the point where we have a mainstream show about drag queens coming out worldwide, pun unintended, I guess, the variety of ways queer people have been expressed is still decidedly limited. Richard Dyer, a queer theorist, notes this representation of queer people, and states, lesbian or gay culture has always had, for the sake of political clarity, to include assertions of clear images of lesbian or gay identity, but it has also always carried an awareness of the way that a shared and necessary public identity outstrips the peculiarity and messiness of actual lesbian or gay lives. We have felt a need to authorise our own images, to speak for ourselves, even while we have known that those images don't quite get what any one of us is or what all of us are. And this is a very apt way of phrasing the problem with the gays we see on the telly.
How do you fucking town bar once all week? Who are we? Okay. Gia Gunn and Laganja? Okay.
The only way queer people are accepted into a mainstream audience, with a few exceptions, is when queer people are treated as though they are merely a spectacle to be observed, rather than people who live lives. The sassy remarks made by drag queens are a temporary escape to a fantasy world where you meet a room full of wonderful characters before you can go about your day an hour later without ever needing to think about a gay person ever again. You forget that being queer is something permanent. I know a certain section of right-wing gay people refute the idea that this represents who they are, which you're missing out, to be honest, but I'll see your point through, I guess. Gay iconography, gay slang, and gay stereotypes have been undergoing a process of reclamation by gay people, especially in the 2010s. Gone are the
infamous tirade at the Longacre Theatre.
Okay, James Corden still decided to do that, I guess, but the role of the pantomime-esque, flamboyant, boneless-in-the-wrist straight men mocking the queer experience has all but seemingly vanished in this decade. And by that, I mean the portrayal of queer people in a pejorative light as perverts and pop culture-obsessed weirdos. I mean, we are, but okay, the stereotype holds true, but it's still not nice to do it. Queerness has so many other facets to it that are deemed too unsightly for television. The opinion on monogamy or lack thereof, the question of sexuality when it comes to trans people, the little attention given to queer people in poverty, the meaning of religion to queer people, how to be inclusive of sexuality to queer people in school. I graduated high school in 2015 and not once was I spoken to about having gay sex, understanding how a transition works, or the dangers involved in gay sex. There are so many other topics about the queer experience that are only relegated to a 4-minute confessional of a drag queen's backstory on RuPaul's Drag Race for a mainstream audience to see. And right-wing gay people in particular want to see these issues addressed without the performativity, which can make for a very different show. But the gay experience is wider than just Drag Race. And it's one of the only points right-wing queer people make that I can get behind. The queer experience isn't just the nightclubs, the drag, the pride events. There is a lot more to be looked at here. Though hopefully with less internalized homophobia, yeah?
Nope, no one stopped us, done anything, so it's pretty good.
I just look at people like Piers Morgan and see that they can't help but think that audiences don't want to hear these struggles. You got your rights to gay marriage, what else could you need? I need people to watch us without turning their noses upwards, calling our scenes of intimacy raunchy and perverse, while excitedly spurring on the steamy hot love scenes in other shows. I want my sexuality to be understood and comprehended rather than just being told, I don't care what you do in the bedroom, or love whoever you like, if it makes you happy. Because all it tells me is, as long as I don't have to see you being what you are, I can live my life. Being gay is more than just what you do in the bedroom. I don't decide to switch on the gay button in the bedroom, though I wish I could sometimes. Meow. God. I didn't. Oh my god. Okay, this is great. I look at a lot of life through a different lens compared to a straight person. I get nervous going into a pub in conservative towns if I dress a little fruity that day. I see that there are cities with literally no gay venues, never mind nightclubs, and I am still an illegal existence in 72 countries as of writing, some places punishable by death. We need actual queer people in these roles because my existence is not solely bound to a 1-hour campfest or a bid to please the Oscars. We don't get to take off our queerness at the door when the job is done.
Playing gay, everybody wants to give him an award. Thank you for gracing us with your straight presence.
Yeah.
So that gets tiresome.
Yep.
I think I am giving straight actors a little bit of a tough time when it comes to their actual performances though. Corden was casted by a series of people who ultimately made this choice with intent, and the same goes with the remainder of other roles that feature straight people playing a gay role. The simple truth as to why this happens in the first place is not directly apparent, but easy to believe if I were to just say, the people they cast sell the most money, and that usually excludes queer people unless they can be exploited. When Brokeback Mountain came out, there was a widespread outrage that places like Walmart were stocking the film, as if it were promoting some sort of gay agenda to normalize homosexuality to the mainstream audiences.
Why are you out here tonight? Well, 3 reasons. Number 1, we're out here because we care about the souls of men. Number 2, to renounce a movie that's about something God calls an abomination before him, the sin of sodomy, the sin of homosexuality. God says that's an abomination before him. Number 3, we're out here to preach Jesus Christ. The Bible says the only way to be saved, to escape hell, is to see ourselves as a sinner, repent of our sin, whether it's sodomy, drunkenness, homosexuality, it doesn't matter, and turn to Jesus Christ by faith and be born again.
And this was the response from a Walmart spokesperson. The fact that we are offering the movie is not an endorsement of the content of the movie or any specific belief. We simply offer the latest titles that consumers want. Yum! We aren't endorsing the gays. Why would we? They're just here because they sell at the moment. Ugh. Hollywood did eventually begin to portray queer people on screen in the late 90s and early 2000s as somewhat realistic people. I, however, think this would have been seen as Hollywood doing its part to promote the idea of queerness being something that isn't freakish or perverted. It is a shame that the majority of these queer roles were at the expense of having them be side or minor characters who were relegated to quite a limited way of expressing themselves besides flamboyant or tokenistic.
Hey, get out of here!
Oh my god, Danny DeVito, I love your work!
See Damien in Mean Girls or Christian from Clueless, where they're used more as the butt of a light-hearted joke.
What? Yo, look, are you bitches blind or something? Your man Christian is a cake boy.
A what?
He's a disco dancing, Oscar Wilde reading, Streisand ticket holding friend of Dorothy, know what I'm saying?
No way.
He's gay.
Not even.
Yes, even.
But hey, at least it's not active ridicule, because that's the kind of compromises we're making in the 1990s and 2000s. Oh, Damien. Oh, he's gay. That's just his thing, you know. Unfortunately, the idea of gay men being the good kind of gay, meaning insistent good behaviour and absence of sexual expression, is still the dominant preferred portrayal of gay people today. Damien, for example, in the emotional peak of Mean Girls, is more interested in getting back home before curfew than confronting Katie's treacherous friendship, and spends the majority of the film performing stereotypical gayisms than receiving any particular type of plot-based intentions.
Buddy, you're not pretending anymore. You're plastic. Cold, shiny, hard plastic.
Curfew, 1 a.m. It is now 1:10.
He is a comedic relief, but it still remains that his sexuality by today's standards is sort of the butt of the joke here. Unfortunately, Damien's actor, Daniel Francesi, I'm bad and don't know how to say words, Daniel Francesi, we'll go with that, was still in the closet, and after Mean Girls, couldn't find work because casting directors from there would only cast him in regressive gay roles, and that's a man who wasn't even out of the closet yet. Taking what you can get is something I found the queer community has had to do for years. It started with the mere accusation of being gay being the suspenseful plotline, before incremental improvements were made to the representation of gay people were beginning to be introduced. Daniel situation does bring about another aspect to this discussion that concerns closeted queer actors as well. Where would they fit into this piece? This applies also to actors who are open to their friends or to their industry, but not to their parents or other institutions known for homophobia. Drag Race has had a fair few occasions where a contestant has not been out to their family before, and being on the show serves as a coming out of sorts, which is a huge emotional burden to bear on top of being on a very stressful reality TV show. There is also a concern that actors who have come out of the closet encourage other actors to not let the industry know that they are gay, because they get pigeonholed into solely queer roles rather than being able to play who they want to, or that there is this barrage of publicity for someone's sexuality when they do come out that is not needed or often wanted. People in the press seem to not afford queer people the luxury of privacy when it comes to their sexuality after recently coming out. It usually is a big story with whoever the celebrity is. And while it is mostly positive attention these days, some actors don't want it to be a big statement. And I think that is a very good reason to not want to talk to others about their sexuality. Others wait for their careers to flourish before coming out. Not necessarily with intention, but when actors get older, their personal identity within the industry becomes solidified, such as with Neil Patrick Harris. You also have the issue of queer actors being forced to come out to prove themselves worthy of certain roles within films too, which is why I will stand with the opinion that there is no right way to perform gay. Another argument is that straight people playing queer gives them less worry about the repercussions of doing that for themselves. There is not an easy answer to this question, and it is very much an individual issue from person to person as to why they are or are not out yet. I would love to hear about this issue in particular in the comments, as there obviously isn't a lot to find out about this except from people who are already out. So the next logical argument to this may be, if there is not a specific way a gay person should be played, why does it matter if the actor is straight? Firstly, I would provide the alarming observation that you consistently providing "what does it mean to be gay" rebuttals says more about you having me justify my life experience than it does to further any actual debate. But no, I suppose we should delve into it. It's just a debate, right? I suppose queer folk are used to it at this point in time. You are right, there is no one way to be gay. I don't get that. This is my video. You'll get cut off when I want you to. Cate Blanchett makes this statement in defense of her lesbian role in Carol.
I was asked repeatedly about my sexuality in ways that I was never asked when I played a psychic, if I had psychic abilities, or if I, played an elf. Was I really immortal?
This argument is ludicrous yet very commonly made, and personally, I would prefer to find whether the person is genuinely invested in the debate or just sick of hearing queer people complaining to her about the role she accepted to play a part in. Because I'm not going to sit here and watch someone compare pretending to be a plumber or a psychic to pretending to be gay, because they don't care nor want to see gay people playing these roles instead of them. I do. This argument always is selfishly misconstrued as an attack on straight people rather than a question of representation. Because Cate Blanchett really has it hard at the moment. Nonetheless, performances such as those found in Call Me By Your Name or Brokeback Mountain or even Carol are some standout acts which feature some heartfelt and moving scenes of intimacy and heartache. Didn't stop people protesting the Oscars when Brokeback Mountain was nominated though. The actors' performances themselves I don't find to be the actual issue within the film. Mostly. When I watched Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer, I, shockingly, believed the performances they were cast in. The framing of the story appears to just be two people being in love, with the queer aspect of the romance moved behind to be a bit of a backdrop to the primary narrative between Elio and Oliver. Or the way the world views queer people appears to be more of a background threat outside of this wonderful Italian summer paradise. In any case, the way the film frames their romance is good, and the story is well written and well told. There is something I do struggle to put into words about a gay relationship on screen. Knowing that those actors are gay just feels so much more of a statement than the mere inclusion of queer characters. As we've seen in Hollywood, they can and will throw in these queer characters to do their part, or provide certain token characters to appease a certain level of the diversity quota that it still ignores the chances of queer people finding a career in an industry that refuses them for being too gay. My problem with the quota is simple. Tokenism is a queer character on stage. Representation is putting a queer life on stage. They are different in that one was queer before they entered the room. Putting these queer actors in front of a lens provokes much more of a response than the retelling of a queer story through a heterosexual narrator, especially to the people who are affected by the conflicts of the story. To put this in an easier to understand context for those who don't experience this issue, there was an immersive installation piece called Exhibit B, and its purpose was to immerse the audience in a piece of history when black and racial minorities were kept in cages in a kind of human zoo for the affluent white population to visit, to marvel at those with darker skin. This voyeurism towards black people in the performance is clearly disgusting, and it is an effective example of forcing the audience to have an introspective debate over the history of their white ancestors, and it's really hard-hitting stuff. But that isn't the most controversial part. Because, oh, by the way, the creator of the Human Zoo installation is white. Brett Bailey, the creator of the installation, is also from an affluent background in South Africa, who grew up during apartheid, so it was likely he saw the effects of colonialism right before his eyes. No matter the intentions of Brett Bailey, the optics of his exhibition were never going to be positive, because even when put through a lens of a post-colonial world, how is this different for the audience from the human zoos of the past? The fact that the performers are actors? Even if you agreed Bailey apparently isn't the most agreeable chap. All the while, Bailey is an uneasy, almost abrasive presence, making unhelpful comments about the revealing nature of the costumes and spouting the N-word provocatively in his clipped South African intonation. Yeah, maybe rethink this idea. Remember that given circumstances thing I mentioned before? With this in mind, let's look at a less intense but still an important example. The context of how the story is told, both in front of and behind the camera, is important. Which is why when an openly gay director such as Guadagnino directs something like Call Me By Your Name, I really want to understand why these two straight actors, however good they are, were the answer. And what worries me is some of the methodology involved to get there.
Well, we hadn't had a really proper rehearsal yet. Army tells this story better than I do, so I'll let him cut me off at a certain point. But, you know, we were rehearsing the villa, we were shot the film, where the film takes place, and Luca, our director, one day says, okay, let's do a rehearsal, we're gonna go into the backyard, join us. And so Army and I were very enthusiastic. We had our scripts, and we went in the backyard.
And we get out to this sort of like patch of grass, and he goes, okay, we'll rehearse right here. Let's just pick a scene. Let's do scene 71. And he just kind of arbitrarily throws out a number. So we go, okay, great. We go to our page, and we get to the page on the script, and all it says is, Elio and Oliver roll around in the grass making out. And we kind of look at each other, and we're like, all right, here we go. That's why we're here. Let's do this. So we kind of get down on the ground and start making out. And he goes, no, stop. What are you doing? And we go, we're trying to make out. He goes, I want you two to make out like you want to make out with each other, like passionately. And we were like, good direction. Yes, that's exactly what we should be doing. Let's do it. So then we start making out, and then we're making out, and then we're making out, and then we're making out, and no one's saying stop, and all of a sudden we both kind of stop, and we look, and Luca had just walked away, and just left us, like there, rolling around in the grass.
Okay, believe it or not, I have had a similar thing happen to me before, and this isn't something cute to do to your actors, though luckily for me, my director and my acting partner, we were all friends prior to the show, so anything uncomfortable was quickly resolved by virtue of our pre-established relationship. I appreciate the two's willingness to perform the role, but the context of a gay director, by a perfect coincidence, choosing the makeout scene to be watching two straight men licking each other's faces off and then walking away also doesn't provide the best optics for your audience either. I'm sure this exercise made the point he wanted to make, but this is A, not the cool director move you think it is, and B, this is why intimacy directors exist who can provide healthy ways to approach sex scenes and scenes that contain upsetting things for actors to go through.
They have intimacy coordinators.
Yeah, what do they do?
So they're basically there to make everybody feel good, right? So they're there and they like choreograph the sex scenes a bit like a dance.
Though it is concerning that not a lot of people even know that intimacy directors even exist. I am glad we are entering a time where the process of creating art and film is being critiqued as well now, as the pain to get the end product does not need to come at the expense of two straight actors having an icebreaker makeout session before having your director wander off. Too many shitty things are happening to actors off camera to provide the audience with the 2-hour film. But then you get this sly kind of argument.
And sometimes people who aren't gay are better at being gay than people who are.
Now, to clarify, Miriam... What the fuck is it with these British names, Jesus? Miriam Margolyes is a lesbian herself, and some gay people do agree with this statement. Remarkably, there's not a lot to deconstruct here, as it's more of a jovial observation than anything. However, the better at being gay thing can be both harmful to straight and gay actors, as it perpetuates more feminine acting straight actors being typecast as gay and stops actual gay people from being cast in those roles. On the question of representation overall, I just can't help but wonder if the performance between two straight actors performing a queer relationship has certain audiences depoliticized the inherent modern politics of films like Call Me By Your Name, but rather treat it as a profound challenge for an actor to overcome. Any viewers who aren't a fan of gay actors can rationalize this as a performance, or that the performance is pretend, and that means they don't have to think about queer actors getting the representation they deserve, because look, they're right there in front of you. Whereas, if they were two gay men performing the roles, that sincerity is reapplied here. The two actors who share a kiss also share that same experience growing up to understand what that kiss means, both to them and the world around them. You can appreciate the complexity of the performances, but are we not instead impressed by straight actors committing to such a brave role? Unfortunately, this is where we get into the metaphysical aspects of what acting is, or what theatricality is or isn't, and that's not something we'll ever get a clear-cut answer to in response. One thing I am fairly confident, however, is that the stories of these queer people and the trauma they undergo does err upon romanticization through Hollywood eyes.
Yeah, Momo.
I think I have done enough undertaking of certain talking points that you probably have taken your pick of your opinion on this subject by now. I am starting to find that having debates about semantics becomes cyclical and redundant beyond a certain point, so let's leave Piers Morgan be to rant on his own accord. Now, let's have a look into some data. Whether you agree on the issue being raised in this video or not, there is definitely a level of invisibility when it comes to LGBT issues outside of the art sectors of countries such as the USA or the UK. A study looking into LGBT discourse was done looking at 3,406 articles from 2000 to 2015 to find keywords such as gay, LGBT, lesbian, or words similar in nature. These were performed with articles from the UK, Romania, Cyprus, Malta, Greece, and Italy. They then found links between the subjects discussed and what the news articles were debating, such as morality versus law or policy versus arts, and noted their findings. In the UK and Greece, for example, the Greek and British samples have in common the factor labelled policy versus arts, which suggests that, besides presenting the LGBT issue as a political issue, the media in the two countries favour a representation of LGBT people as eccentrics involved in the arts, or as characters in artistic productions. Such representations may not seem problematic at first sight, since they do not necessarily imply negative contents. Still, they may suggest that being LGBT is classed as an odd phenomenon, usually existing in artistic domains, rather than in the ordinary life of regular people. And when I look at media which is popular in the UK, the representation of this holds true. Call Me By Your Name features Elio as a talented musician with a secret. Most of the gay cast of It's a Sin are also in the arts, and I will talk about It's a Sin later, don't worry. And the majority of Drag Race contestants support this conclusion as well. The stereotype of queer people pursuing the arts is true as well, and I think the description of LGBT people being an odd phenomenon found in the arts is a fair way we in the UK see gay people, especially in theatre. So queer people in STEM subjects, or the ones in office jobs, or the ones just running a family are barely ever spoken about. Instead, we have many retellings of Oscar Wilde type, of queer artists that live eccentric lives in the arts only to die tragically young. This isn't necessarily a critique of the current representation we have, but it does support the statement I made earlier that queer people exist beyond Drag Race and liberal arts, and the media needs to show this. Why is there almost nothing, for example, about Alan Turing? Oh my god, of course Benedict Cumberbatch played him, Jesus Christ! Do you see my issue? Somehow queer actors and artists rarely make it to be even represented despite being so prevalent in the arts, never mind in the office or the lab. This only gets worse when you begin to look at the statistics for countries with low LGBT tolerance, such as Romania. One factor appeared only in the Romanian sample, normality versus deviance. The Romanian media was the only case where LGBT people and issues were associated with criminal acts, or deviance and scandal. These findings are to be linked to the rather slow progress the country has made regarding the legal and social emancipation of LGBT people. Romania is an Eastern European country that, like many of the countries surrounding it, has more of an explicit distaste for the homosexual man. Don't get me wrong, it's not a rule that if you ever meet a Romanian they will hate you if you're gay, it's just the perception the mainstream has of the LGBT community that is the issue here. This heavily implies that media pertaining to, and in positive representation of, LGBT people is often criticised for even featuring these people as sympathetic characters. And Then We Danced, a film from the country, not the state, of Georgia in Eastern Europe, which garnered critical praise from our side of things, but had heated protests in the country. I'm aware that Georgia is not Romania. In fact, Georgia could have arguably a worse view of queer people than Romania does. But the Eastern Bloc is known for its conservative reputation, with neither country having same-sex unions be recognised legally. The stories about queer people in areas that have higher tolerance levels still focus on the stigmatisation that AIDS has given gay men in particular. In the British sample, the poll-labelled stigma of the third factor extracted contains lemmas, or the dictionary definition of a set of words referring to traditionally stigmatised illnesses like AIDS, and to LGBT people's existences of stigma in society. This result shows that the association of AIDS with homosexuality, one of the most intriguing findings in studies about the social representations of AIDS, is still persistent in British society, regardless of the fact that the British score high in tolerance and acceptance of LGBT people. The British media also portray LGBT people as victims of stigma and homophobia, which confirms the findings of Lovelock that these phenomena are still present in British society. The study Lovelock did shows a few articles about homophobic press coverage, which I will link in the description too. It's a Sin came out this year, 2021, and the show tells the story of the experiences gay men had with the AIDS pandemic in the 80s, and how the campaigning conservatives like Margaret Thatcher transformed homosexual men's image from a normal person to this disease-ridden monster.
The ladies not for turning.
The relentless homophobia in this series is understandable, not because it's justified, but rather you can see how the upbringing of these families contributed to the perception of gay culture. And my, have I never hated a character so much until watching this show. This show also features the public information film, or PIF, Monolith, spreading awareness about the AIDS virus in the common scaremongering style that the PIFs from this time adopted.
The virus can be passed during sexual intercourse with an infected person. Anyone can get it, man or woman.
I actually talk about this PIF in a bit more detail in my PIF video, and observing the reaction to this PIF from a gay person's perspective was fairly impactful. You should go and watch this series whenever you can though, as it is one of the few examples that really capture the essence of a part of gay culture in an authentic way. Though it is a bit of a harrowing watch, I will grant you that. I think my only issue with it is that the story once again revolves around a white twink when there are so many other stories being told in this show. While other countries mentioned in the study have much work to do in order to recognise the lawful existence of queer people, the UK needs to remove the stigma attached to things like AIDS and illnesses that were often attributed to homosexuality. The fact we're still making contemporary media, shows and films that still shock audiences regarding bigotry and the struggles of the LGBT community is a clear testament to the fact that it still exists within the UK and is not immediately removed with the swish of a pen or signing a piece of legislation. Look, it's not hard. See, just go on a Facebook post talking about pride. Homophobia is still alive and kicking. After all, we currently reside with the Queen of TERFs herself, and representation beyond the G of LGBT is ridiculously small or still controversial to even scream. This video's examples primarily being of gay white men is a bit of an indicator itself about the dire amount of representation of those that aren't white gay cis men. We are making gradual steps towards the right direction. Talks about non-binary people and transgender people are currently in the forefront of identity politics when it comes to conservative talking points, so the outcome of the trans debate will definitely reach its conclusion in the next few years before legislature acknowledging their existence comes to fruition, for better or for worse. While my issue as a gay man does relate to straight men taking on the roles of queer characters, lesbian, trans, non-binary and POC or black queer representation is almost invisible, so I am aware of the privilege I hold in retrospect. Portrayals of queer people as a contagion of a gay disease, as violent cross-dressers, and as perverts are some of the primary issues the LGBT face in a Western European and US society. But there's still so little given to the rights of queer people in the Eastern Bloc, in Africa, in Asia, that even allows them to exist in the first place. When I get frustrated seeing Armie Hammer playing Oliver, it's not because he gave a bad performance or that he doesn't want to represent queer lives in a constructive way. It's because that role, like Eddie Redmayne's role, like Heath Ledger's role, or like Cate Blanchett's role, took one queer person's job away, selling names that it wants for better sales while simultaneously championing tokenism in the name of Hollywood doing its part. We need queer people in these roles because seeing those queer lives on your own screen without it being a performance gives hope to those who have to watch this in secret, that it is in some capacity possible to be accepted and praised for the person that you are.
The whole of that time it was associated in my mind with guilt, sordid matters, elderly, unpleasant men. It was in no way associated with reasonable, mature, normal, ordinary, pleasant people.
What happened to change this?
I met somebody who was reasonable, ordinary, pleasant, mature and normal, and who was queer.
Thank you for giving this a little watch. I guess the only thing carrying through from the last video I did is me just improving the outro, I suppose. Give it a like, give it a comment, give it a subscribe, give it all those lovely little things, click the bell, tell your mum about it, and this was a long process for me because this started from like how the internet radicalizes you, and that was an interesting topic, but then I watched this specific YouTube channel talking about how gay people shouldn't feel offended that a straight person's playing their role, and I'm like, what? And it just kind of went from there, but thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time. Cheers.